From Santa Barbara, California, the timeless Voyager Series, where the knowledge is timeless and you are the Voyager. Interviews with leading-edge authors and speakers, psychic phenomena and the unexplained, UFOs, extraterrestrial encounters, government cover-ups, alternative healthcare, new technologies. Fasten your cosmic seatbelts and join me, your host, Bruce Stephen Holms, the timeless Voyager.
Guest, Randolph Winters, is probably one of the best sources of information concerning our Pleiadian heritage. He's written a book called The Pleiadian Mission, and I'd like to welcome my guest to Timeless Voyager Radio, Randolph Winters. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Bruce. Can you hear me okay?
Now I can, yes.
Okay, yeah.
So much to talk about. We just don't have time to play around here.
Well, let's get right to it then, huh?
Yeah, the information comes from your certainly reading and spending time editing the information from the contact papers. Is that correct?
Well, that's true. A little quick background. I managed to get over and meet and spend a lot of time with Billy Meyer in Switzerland several years ago and discovered that he had had contacts for years and amassed thousands of pages of notes with just about a question about everything you could think of, and had all this information that really wasn't getting out to the public. So I spent several months there learning all I could and talking to the man every day. And then I wrote the book, The Pleiadian Mission, which is kind of a compilation, a general summary, a simple summary of all these thousands of pages of notes. And the history was one of the more intriguing parts of it in there, that we might be getting some insights in here to some of our heritage from different places that could be kind of a great surprise to us where some people may have come from.
Okay, so let's take about 1 minute before we have to break. This is the way things are around here. Let's see if we can frame this thing so that our listeners understand. First of all, most of this happened where, 75 to, 78, I think?
Yeah, 75 through 78, Billy Meyer had about 115 physical contacts with these beings from the Pleiades.
Okay, and the Pleiades are, I was going to say, where are they?
Yeah, well, they're a little cluster of stars in the Taurus section of the sky that's usually visible to the naked eye in the wintertime in the northern hemisphere. Sometimes they're thought of as like a little mini dipper or something, and they're about 350 to 500 light years away. We've been watching them for years, and there's writings in old Indian legends, the Quran, the Bible, all over the place historically about our connection to the Pleiades, and in reference to it possibly being, some source of human life. And now we're finding out that some of these beings seem to be coming here to contact us and are willing to talk a little bit about their connection to us and how we got here.
Okay, now my understanding is that Jmmanuel, which is a female pilot of a beam ship, was mostly, I think, predominantly the contact that Billy Meyer had.
Yeah, she spent several years studying his thinking before she actually started the physical contacts. Apparently they were being very careful about it, and most of his contacts were with this lady who he called Jmmanuel. He had some meetings with some of the other Pleiadians, but only 2 or 3 of them. Most all of them are with her. I was visiting Billy and found out he had so much information, and just touching on the history a little bit, I was fascinated to find out that these beings from the Pleiades, who are human just like we are, and apparently quite benevolent, say that we have some common ancestry with them, that their interest in us apparently is because some of their ancient ancestors came here quite some thousand years back and colonized here on several occasions. And when they came into Earth, they discovered that and became kind of interested in us. So I think it's kind of like a connection with long-lost family or something. So we've got a nice connection here, apparently, with some human life in the Pleiades. And so far, they seem to be interested enough to take the time to not only observe us, but to get somewhat involved through educating us slightly. So That's what the book is all about, historical information, scientific information on how their craft fly and how they move through the dimensions, and a lot of spiritual things about life and, what our cycles are like, what incarnation is, and what happens to us from lifetime to lifetime, and how we store that information. So it was quite pretty exciting for me to spend a lot of time with Meyer and get to learn a lot of these things, so I packed it all into a book.
All right, now, we're going to try to investigate as many parts of this book as possible, and we're going to also try to take some phone calls from our listeners. Life in the Pleiadian world. Now, these people who are humanoid, as you've described, and who we look like, they look like us, we look like them, and that's because they're our progenitors, came to, or have been on our world, and incidentally, let's frame this so that we don't lose some of the exciting events that are occurring right now. This book is written about most of the information that Billy Meyer has assimilated or put together, but up until recently we had not heard much from them, and now we're hearing from them again, aren't we?
Yeah, Meyer's contacts were like 75 through 78, and then he kind of became a recluse and developed, I guess you might say, a small attitude problem towards the outside world, and kind of, stayed home.
Of course, it's because his life has been threatened.
Yeah, he had a tough time. I think thousands of people just trampled down his yard and, went into his house, and the magazines and newspaper and the media was very hard on him, and he did his best to try to come out in the public and talk about this, but he was kind of a pioneer and one of the first to come along out in the, with this kind of information, and the public didn't take kindly to it at first, so Billy just went home and closed his doors, so there hasn't been too much talk about it at all for years, and now it seems to be starting again. The Pleiadians apparently have chosen somebody new here in America, and there's some new contacts just starting now the past 2 or 3 months here, and it's starting to get exciting again. I was just down in Florida this past week talking to the man who's having the contacts, and we're very hopeful. Looks like they're going to start up again with a new group, and hopefully we'll see a whole new phase of action here where perhaps the ETs will take a little stronger hand in things.
Now, to perhaps give people an idea as to what Billy was privy to, they actually, and I'm talking about the Pleiadians, specifically Semyase and her pilot ship, they actually posed for pictures.
Well, they did. That was one of their big concerns. They knew by, listening to our thoughts that, because of the way we are in our society, there'd be a certain measure of proof necessary or nobody's going to pay attention to Billy Meyer. After all, he's just a small-town farmer in Switzerland, and if he were to come out in town and say, hey, I'm talking to aliens and I got some interesting things to tell you, no one would pay any attention. But if you show up with these beautiful daytime photos, of UFOs better than anybody else has ever seen before, then people are at least going to stop and pay attention. And in his case, unfortunately, most of them thought he was crazy. But he did manage to get the attention of the world, and I think he's, really got things moving around the planet as far as people paying attention now to, information of higher consciousness. So it paid off quite well, and Meyer kind of got the ball rolling.
Now, these are some of the most beautiful pictures that have ever been taken. I have the big blue book that has all of those stills from the 8mm film. It's highly unlikely that anyone, a few people have tried to debunk this stuff, but really it's almost non-debunkable. Of course, anything can be debunked if you want to.
Well, you know what has happened, that when Meyer came out and started, imagine that this guy comes forward and says, hey, I've been time-traveling with aliens, and I met Christ, and I went back to watch the pyramids built, and I watched Moses, and I've been to the future, and I've seen where we're going. Extreme things like this that sound so far out that people just wrote him off as a nutcase. Yeah, I was just mentioning that Meyer's information is so extreme and that it challenges so many of our paradigms of thinking, especially in the religious and philosophical world, that I've noted over the years that many of the people that have tried to debunk the case are really people that are offended by some of the things that he says, and they...
Let's be specific. Let's talk about two things that really stretch, if not completely crumble, belief systems.
Well, most in particular, Meyer has always been very adamant about the fact that religions, in particular that the Catholic Church, has been, quite incorrect, that might be a way of putting it, towards their way they've handled the information about Jesus over the years. And he's published a number of writings about that, and through the help of the Pleiadians, he was even able to get his hands on some old Aramaic scrolls, which were dug up in 1963, which purportedly are the original writings of Jesus before he died. And so that's been a subject of tremendous controversy over the years, and because of that, it's irritated some people because it speaks out against organized religion. And I know for a fact that 2 or 3 of the people that have tried to debunk the case, that's been why. They've just been very irritated with Billy.
Let me see here. Samyase says, other solar systems beyond ours do exist with many forms of life, and not only the human. She says there are also many animal and even plant life forms that have evolved to higher forms. Why don't you comment on that?
Well, apparently it's true that there are quite a few. There are even quite a few planets where there is the human form like ours, and imagine that if it was somehow mated with different types of animals, like a reptile or a fish or something like that. Billy's had contact with a couple of those races. There is a race of people that have actually come to Earth that he's met that have rather scaly skin like a fish, and their heads are different, or rather an incredible concept, but he says it's true. They exist. And they're quite intelligent. They build discs, and they are traveling the cosmos. There's also a rather nasty group of beings that appear kind of half man, half reptile, that have very, reptilian features and a bony fin down their back, and they're very warlike, and they come here occasionally and have posed quite a problem for the Pleiadians and other groups that kind of protect us a little bit from time to time. And they apparently would like to take over the planet, apparently, if they could. But fortunately, so far to this point, we understand the Pleiadians have been able to kind of keep them off. So, but there's a lot of different types of life out there. And it's, we're living at a really fascinating time, Bruce. If we could just hang on for like another 30 years, we might start getting out there and start meeting ETs from different places. And it could be very exciting.
I notice here that basically Samyase, and she's just echoing the Pleiadian warnings, has said that there are, as you've just stated, other beings who are malicious, and basically they would just as soon destroy the planet or even force us to be slaves.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's what they say, and they mention that the time was rapidly coming when conflict with them might not be avoidable much longer.
Now, I like this. This is an interesting concept. They state very, very straightforward that they do not in any way come to Earth on behalf of a god.
No.
At all.
Not at all. No, not at all. As a matter of fact, their whole level of philosophy and thinking about life is so different than ours that, we don't have enough time to really do the whole thing. It's their whole point is that they have evolved to a point of consciousness where they are becoming so spiritual, they now understand their connection to creation and know a lot more about life and our reason for our existence. As a matter of fact, I devoted about 4 chapters in the book to that just because the thinking is so different. So,
my understanding is that Samyase and Billy spent most of their time speaking through telepathy. Is that correct?
Well, not quite. All the contacts were physical contacts. She'd come and pick him up in the craft, and they would go sit someplace and talk. But then they had kind of an unusual situation. After the contact was over, she would send him home, and in order for him to be able to write down all of his contact notes and get his information correct, she had a device in the craft that would read her thoughts, because her mind apparently is of higher consciousness, and she could store this information and recall it better. The device somehow would, record all their conversation and their thoughts, and then would replay it back to Billy. Billy would go home and sit at his typewriter and put his one arm on the typewriter, just has one arm, and he would proceed to type it all out again. So that's rather mechanical. They had a device doing that. They did have a lot of communication telepathically, but she didn't trust the writing of the information through telepathy. Billy wasn't that good at it. Most of the telepathy was used really to let him know that she was coming, give him information on where to find her and things like that.
All right, let's take our first call. I believe it's Ruth from West Virginia. Welcome to the show, Ruth.
Yes, good evening.
Hi.
Well, actually, it's morning where I am. But
good morning, too.
I have a friend that works for a radio station in Lima, Ohio, that carries your show, and he would love to go on a vacation and visit another planet. But anyway, will there be a time when we can contact them and say, hey, I'd like to come and visit?
Well, Ruth, I think we're moving towards a time here, maybe with these new contacts, where people might possibly at least get their questions answered. Mm-hmm. In the Meyer contact, we didn't have that situation. It was a very kind of closed-door sort of thing, and just a few people were kind of privileged to do that. I'm hopeful here in the new situation where the contacts seem to be starting up again. I just recently got a fax machine for the man down in Florida who's having the contacts, and I'm suggesting to him that people all over the country might have questions of different types that, they need answered. And I'm going to see if I can set something up where people like yourself, if you've got a good question, you can probably fax it to me, and I'll put them together and send them to him, and we'll see if we can get you some answers.
Another thing, what is their, do you know anything about how long do these other people or beings live, and what is their daily diet? Do you know?
Yeah, a little bit about it. As far as their lifespan, we are told that the Pleiadians live an average of around 700 to 1,000 years on our calendar.
Oh, that'd be super. See, I'm working towards physical immortality myself.
Well, there's a couple of ways to... Good, I'm working on it, too. And we can help each other out. They say, basically, one of the reasons they live long is the age of their spirit, that as we go through the incarnation cycles, each lifetime we gain an accumulated wisdom, and that adds strength to the spirit, and that contributes somewhat to the lifespan of the material lifetime. Of course, they have a lot of technical advances, too, and they don't have disease like we do, because, we break the body down so fast because of disease.
Right.
And then we've got a situation, we've got the health situation, we've got the technology thing, and, they have their own methods of keeping themselves living longer. One of the things we're going to have a breakthrough here, and you'll probably start hearing about it more in the next year or two, there have been some tremendous breakthroughs in genetics on how to feed the DNA and make it stop the aging process. Actually, we've had for about 5 years the ability to feed food directly to the DNA in the form of ATP molecules and almost stop the aging process altogether. But
how are we going to do that? Through intravenous or what?
It's intravenous at the moment in the laboratories, and you can buy it in Europe. The problem is the FDA will not allow it here. They're blocking it.
Of course not.
Yeah, and I think eventually in the next year or two there's going to be enough people hearing about it. We're going to have to put some force on the FDA and let these kinds of things find their way into the marketplace. But the inventions are coming along. I've seen them myself. I've even gone out of the country and got some of the shots myself, and they work. They rebuild your internal organs, and they do slow down the aging process. So we just have to kind of change our politics so we can make better use of these things. But I think, it's a good thought you have about living much longer. I think we're really on the verge of it, and we'll have some major breakthroughs in the next few years.
Okay, Ruth,
what's their daily diet?
Mostly veggies.
All right.
They munch.
They munch?
Yeah, they don't have prepared meals like we do. They don't have kitchens. They don't cook things. They mostly kind of munch on fruits and veggies. Billy says when he's on board a craft that usually just maybe have an apple or something like that around, and they munch. He never even saw them sit down and eat like a full meal. They don't do that. They've managed somehow to breed into their food. It changes their metabolism. And they don't sleep very much, and they don't eat very much. And that somehow contributes to their health, too.
All right, Ruth, thanks very much for the call. That was good. Wes from Tennessee?
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Huh?
Welcome to the show.
Yes. I had a question about how does he, that person you're talking about where he got all the information from, how he contacted them and, how they came to visit him.
Well, he didn't make the initial contact, Wes. They did. That's one of the problems we have with ETs, that it's kind of their agenda, and they show up when they want for their own reasons. We haven't been able to force that issue so far. In the Billy Meyer case, he believes that he was born on purpose. He thinks the ETs caused him to be born so he would have a lifetime as a contact person for them. And he's literally had contacts all of his life. As far as being able to initiate them yourself, I think we're getting closer to a time when they may listen, and you might actually get some response through meditation. I think possibly in the next few months we might be able to provide you with some mantras and some sounds that you could meditate with, and you might be able to make some contact. We're getting to that point.
So they just come to visit him. He doesn't send, like, meditate or send signals or anything?
Yeah, he does. When he was young, they taught him to do that, but they initiated the contacts. The contacts didn't start, because he meditated. But through meditation, you can clear your mind and make it possible for them to get in contact with you. You need to shut down most of the material emotions and things that we carry around in our psyche. It's very uncomfortable for them. So in a meditative state, when you can get into that zero area there where you can shut yourself down and let your spiritual self come forward, at that point they're more comfortable. And if they choose to, they might respond. Your best bet is to try it. I can tell you one sound you can use. If you use the sound, there's an Indian sound, moo-ka, moo-ka. If you meditate on that and get into that, that spiritual spot in there, that blank area, you might find something.
Now, the sound is moo-ka?
Yeah, moo-ka. Give it a try.
All right, Wes, thanks for your call. We appreciate that. Tell us about ancient Lyra.
Ancient Lyra, from what we're told by the Pleiadians, and to their knowledge anyway, is like the home of human life. They believe that when the universe was formed and when the galaxies formed, that there was human life literally proliferated all over the place. It's a natural developing part of creation. But in this section of the galaxy, in our galaxy, in the Milky Way, as far as they know, Lyra was one of the original homes of human life here. They're sure it happened in many other areas, but they don't know about it. The reason they're familiar with Lyra, or Lyra, whichever way you want to pronounce it, is they are Lyrian descendants themselves. They know from their own records that the Lyrians, which date back about 22 million years, populated a large area of the Milky Way galaxy. Apparently, Bruce, they had tremendous technologies and developed vast abilities to move from world to world. They dominated thousands of planets. They seeded many of these planets genetically and consequently spread the Lyrian genetic all over the Milky Way area. The thousands of years ago, about 387,000 years back, some of the Lyrians came to Earth. On 5 other occasions, they also came here. And then to kind of sum it up, during some great wars about 230,000 years back, a group of Lyrians split off and went and hid to get away from all the fighting and the wars. And they hid in a small cluster of stars in the Taurus section of the sky. A few years after they'd been there, they were once again living peacefully. They were exploring out in open space. They were tracking a comet. And in the tail of the comet, they found some debris from one of the exploded planets from ancient Lyra. Out of curiosity, they were studying it, and the comet was close to our solar system. It came close to Earth. They detected human life here on Earth, came in, checked the planet out, and found life here. And were very surprised that on Earth, not only to find human life, but to find some of their ancient ancestors from Lyra that were here. So we have some common ancestry with them. The Pleiadians themselves have not lived on Earth, as far as we know, but many of their ancient ancestors from Lyra have. Apparently the Lyrians have spread out all over the place and seated in Orion and Vega, Beta Centauri, quite a few different places. So they seem to be a very old race. There's not much left of the home planets anymore. They've destroyed those off pretty good. They apparently live now just on a couple of planets. But they're a little more, they've calmed down now. They're not so warlike. So apparently they've managed to progress just a little bit. But that seems to be the Pleiadians' interest in us. We have some common ancestry with through the ancient Lyrians.
Now let's just talk a little bit about how they use their beam ships. Now, since the Pleiades are about 500 years, 500 light years from us, they seem to be able to make that transit in about 7 hours or so, which for us is
scientifically that's quite a feat, isn't it?
Yeah. So why don't we describe how that happens and what they do?
Basically, by our current science, it would be impossible. We don't know of any way to move matter that quickly, and that's correct. It can't be done. But they, years ago, if you were in London and wanted to come to New York, say in the 18th century, how'd you get here? You came on a boat, right? And now we get here much faster. I mean, it took weeks on a boat. Now we get here in hours, not because we have faster boats, but because we developed new technology. Now we have airplanes. Well, that's kind of what they've done. They've taken science as far as they could with, the science of matter, and then they discovered what dimensions were. And once they discovered what dimensions were, a whole new level of science opens up. Actually, that 7 hours getting here from the Pleiades, about 3.5 hours is spent flying the craft in material form outside of the Pleiades into open space. Once they get into open space, they convert the ship into what they call fine matter. Basically, what they do is they dematerialize the craft and transform it into another form of energy that moves outside of our dimension, the three-dimensional reality that we live in. The ship then goes into this other dimension, which some of our scientists commonly call hyperspace. Once it's there, time works differently. There, the craft, which is no longer in a solid form, it's now in this fine matter state that they call, can move up anywhere it wants to in the universe at tremendous speeds because it's no longer material. It's kind of in it's like a thought form, they say. Fine matter is a non-material form. And once it gets to where it wants to go, the process is reversed. The fine matter is converted back into solid form. The craft then is again in the material state, and they fly into the solar system wherever they happen to want to go. They can't do this or make this change or conversion, whatever you want to call it, within a solar system. And that necessitates that they usually fly for an hour or two or however long it takes them to get outside of a solar system to make these jumps. They say when they make the jump or conversion, it puts a little rip in the fabric of time. And so they're cautious to keep outside of solar systems so that they don't throw planets out of orbit or suck something in behind them when they do these things. So that 7-hour trip from the Pleiades is mostly just flying out of the Pleiades and flying into our solar system. And the jump is almost instantaneous. There's no awareness of it at all.
Now, I understand Billy had a heck of a time trying to take pictures. They wanted to allow him to take pictures, but his camera, for some strange reason, just wouldn't work most of the time, especially when he was on the ship.
He had a problem in the ship. The camera, yeah, he did have problems. The film was ruined a lot. Apparently, he would shoot some film, and when he would get it developed, it would come back looking like you dipped it in gray paint or something. It messed the film up. He said, oddly enough, though, it makes you feel good when you're in the ship. They control the atmosphere in there somehow, and you don't get tired, you don't get hungry. You could be in there maybe for a day or so, and you don't even notice yourself getting tired. But when you come home, boy, are you hungry and are you tired? There's kind of a slapback effect.
We're going to run out of time, and I think that you need to have a few moments here to tell people why they should read this book.
Well, I think one of the reasons is really that, we're seeing a dramatic change in our civilization here on Earth. I think historically we're moving into a whole new time of change that spiritual people look as kind of a dawn of awareness, We're coming in contact with a family and man throughout the universe. Our planet is going to change radically over the next 20 years, and people need to be educated to find out what's going on so they can be involved in the creating of our future. In the past, we've relied on, politicians, leaders, and so forth, just take care of things for us, but that's not going to work here in the near future. People need to get involved and get educated about what's going on and where we're going in the future, and this is the kind of book that will expose them to the ideas and concepts that they're going to have to deal with in the next few years. So, that's why I wrote it, and I was hoping that people would be able to read this and kind of empower themselves and become responsible themselves and want to take part in creating a new future for us here on Earth. And that's what I see the reason why ETs are actually coming here, to try to provide us with some, stimulating ideas and visions so we will do something.
Rumor has it that you're waiting for a ride.
Well, I think, with the new contacts happening down in Florida, I have asked for a ride, and I've told them that I think it's about time I get one. I want to meet these people myself, and instead of having secondhand information, I'd like to get a little closer to it. So just last Sunday, I received a message from them that told me to just be patient, that, that it looks like it will happen hopefully sometime this summer, but it hasn't happened yet, so I'm pushing for it.
Sounds great. Listen, I can see we need to do more than 1 hour. I had suspected that when we first talked about doing the show. The next time, if you'll do a show with me, I'd like to clear it for a couple hours. That way we'll give our listeners a lot more time to call in. I felt bad that we weren't able to get to all the calls. And at the same time, there's so much more to talk about.
Well, there really really is, and the real essence of all this is most of the spiritual information and life information about ourselves, and that takes a while to really get into. So whenever you'd like to, let's set aside a couple hours and let's talk to people.
All right. Thank you very much for being with us, Randolph.
Thanks, Bruce.
And we will talk soon.
Okay, good night.
All right, the rest of you, I've got about 30 seconds to wrap this thing up. Thank you so much for listening to Timeless Voyager Radio. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for being with me. Tell your friends what a great show it is. And good night.